The Pacific Ocean, 1967. Captain William Ironhand Carter stood in the control room of USS Ironclad, watching the sonar screen with growing unease. They had been tracking a Soviet cargo vessel for 6 hours, maintaining perfect silence, perfect distance. Everything was routine until the sonar operator's hand froze over his controls. Carter moved closer. The screen showed something impossible, a perfect circle of nothing. No echoes, no returns, no thermal signatures, just emptiness where water should be singing back to them. "Sir, we're approaching some kind of dead zone," the operator whispered, his voice tight with confusion. Carter had sailed these waters for 23 years. He knew every trench, every thermal layer, every acoustic shadow. This wasn't on any map. This wasn't natural. "All stop," he ordered. "Hold position." But the Ironclad didn't stop. The submarine continued drifting forward, pulled by something that wasn't current, wasn't tide. Carter felt it in his chest first, a pressure building like descending too fast. Then he noticed the silence. The engine hum was fading, not stopping, but fading, as if someone was turning down the volume of reality itself. He opened his mouth to speak, but his executive officer grabbed his arm, eyes wide with terror. The man's lips were moving frantically, shouting something, but no sound emerged. Carter touched his own throat. He could feel his vocal cords vibrating, feel air passing through his larynx, but the sound simply stopped, erased, consumed by the silence pressing in from all sides. The crew was panicking now, silently screaming, hands clawing at their ears, mouths open in voiceless horror. Carter slammed his fist on the control panel, felt the impact shudder through his bones, but heard nothing. The silence was absolute. The silence was alive. Through the periscope depth window, Carter saw it, a structure rising from the ocean floor. Not a rock formation, not natural. It was a research station, Soviet-made from the look of it, but abandoned, rusted, ancient-looking, despite being in a region that should have been pristine. He grabbed a notepad and wrote in quick, harsh letters, "External suits. Investigate. Find answers." 4 men suited up in the equipment locker, moving in the strange ballet of people who cannot hear their own movements. Carter watched their faces through the helmet glass, eyes too wide, breathing too fast. He knew that look. He'd seen it on men who were about to break. The exterior hatch opened silently. The divers pushed off into water that should have been full of sound, bubbles, equipment, movement, but gave back nothing. Carter watched them swim toward the station, their lights cutting through darkness that seemed thicker than it should be. Inside the station, the lead diver, Patterson, swept his light across control panels covered in Cyrillic text and decades of corrosion. Papers were scattered across desks, coffee cups still sitting where they had been left, as if the occupants had simply vanished mid-shift. Patterson's light fell on a logbook, its pages yellowed, but preserved in the lightless deep. He opened it. The handwriting was erratic, desperate. The date at the top made his blood freeze. March 8th, 1952. 15 years ago. Impossible for equipment this degraded. The entries were in Russian, but Patterson had studied the language. His hands trembled as he translated in his mind. Day 1. We have achieved it. The silence field is stable. Sound cannot penetrate. Perfect stealth technology. Day 3. Minor side effects. Some men report difficulty hearing even after leaving the field. Temporary, we believe. Day 7. The silence is growing, expanding beyond our calculations. We cannot shut it down. Day 12. Kowalski says he saw something in the silence, moving. I told him it's impossible. Nothing can live where sound cannot exist. But I saw it too, shaped like a man. But wrong, all wrong. Day 19. We are trapped. The silence has consumed our communications, our voices. We write now, but the ink seems to fade as we watch, as if the silence is learning to eat more than sound. Day 27. It hunts us. We know this now. It moves through the silence like a shark through water. When you cannot hear it coming, you cannot hide. Petrov is gone. We found his body, but his face showed he'd been screaming when it took him. The final entry was barely legible. written in shaking letters. To whoever finds this, sound is not just vibration, it is time moving forward. Where there is no sound, time stops, but consciousness continues. We are trapped in a moment that will not end, and something ancient has learned to exist in that frozen instant. Do not try to restore the equipment. Do not try to help us. Run. Patterson looked up from the log and froze. In the doorway of the research station stood a figure, human-shaped but somehow hollow, as if carved from the absence of something rather than made of something. It had no eyes, no features, but Patterson felt it watching him, studying him. He tried to scream, but of course, nothing came out. The figure moved closer, not walking but simply existing in different positions, as if it was skipping frames in reality. Patterson stumbled backward, knocking over a chair that fell in perfect silence. His hand found a wrench on the desk, and he swung it at the thing. The metal passed through it like smoke, but Patterson felt something, a coldness that went beyond temperature, a void that tried to pull at his very existence. Back on the Ironclad, Carter saw Patterson's light drop and spin, saw the other divers converging on his position, saw them suddenly scatter like fish before a predator. Something was moving through the water. Something that cast no shadow, made no disturbance, but was undeniably there. Carter wrote frantically on his notepad, held it up to the window where the crew could see. Emergency ascent. Now. But the controls wouldn't respond. The Ironclad sat motionless in the silence, and Carter realized with cold horror what the log had meant. Time had stopped. They were frozen in this moment, but their consciousness continued. They would be aware, forever, trapped in this instant of terror. Then he felt it. A vibration, not sound. Sound was impossible here, but something deeper. A rhythm coming from his own chest, his heartbeat. The one sound the silence couldn't take because it came from within. He grabbed the nearest crewman and placed the man's hand over his heart. The crewman's eyes widened with understanding. One by one, they pressed hands to chests, feeling the rhythm of life still pulsing. If sound was time moving forward, and their hearts were still beating, then time hadn't completely stopped. Not yet. Carter ran to the engine room, the crew following in their silent procession. He pointed at the reactor, at the core that powered everything. It was still running, still creating energy, still generating vibrations too deep for human ears, but powerful enough to shake atoms. He began dismantling the sound baffling, the insulation designed to keep the submarine silent. If the silence fed on the absence of sound, he would give it indigestion. He would make the Ironclad scream with every frequency it could produce. The crew caught on, tearing away acoustic tiles, dismantling every sound-dampening system. Carter went further. He opened the ballast tanks manually, letting air rush through them. He activated every motor, every pump, every mechanical system simultaneously. The submarine should have been tearing itself apart from the vibrations, but they still couldn't hear it. But something else could. Through the window, Carter saw the figure from the station recoil. The absence thing writhed in the water, its form distorting as if in pain. The silence around them began to crack. Not audibly, but visibly, like ice fracturing under pressure. In the station, Patterson saw his chance. The creature had turned its attention toward the Ironclad, toward the growing vibrations that were poison to its existence. He grabbed the logbook and kicked off toward the exit, his 3 companions following close behind. They swam with desperate speed, their lights cutting through water that seemed to fight their passage. The creature noticed. It turned, and Patterson felt its attention like a weight on his soul. It began to follow, moving through the water in that horrible skipping way, appearing closer with each frozen instant. Patterson could see the exit hatch of the Ironclad ahead, could see Carter's face pressed against the window, urging them forward. 50 meters. The creature was gaining, reality bending around it like light around a black hole. 30 meters. Patterson's lungs were burning, his muscles screaming, but he couldn't hear his own heartbeat anymore. The silence was trying to claim him. 10 meters. The creature reached out, and Patterson felt fingers that weren't fingers brush against his ankle. Cold flooded through him, pulling at something essential, trying to trap him in its frozen moment forever. Then suddenly, catastrophically, sound returned. The Ironclad roared like a dying whale, every system screaming in protest. The shockwave of returning sound hit the water like a physical force, and the creature shattered like glass. Patterson and his team tumbled through the water, carried by the pressure wave, and strong hands pulled them through the hatch into safety. The crew collapsed, hands over ears, as months of stored sound seemed to explode back into existence all at once. Carter heard his own voice, had been shouting orders the entire time without knowing it, the words tumbling out in a continuous stream. The submarine lurched upward, pulled by emergency ballast, leaving the silence zone below. As they rose, Carter looked back one final time. The research station was collapsing, imploding, pulled down into a darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. And for just a moment, he saw them, the Soviet crew, still inside, still trapped in their frozen moment, hands pressed against the windows, mouths open in eternal, silent screams. The Ironclad broke surface into a dawn that seemed impossibly bright, impossibly loud. Waves crashed against the hull. Seabirds cried overhead. The engine rumbled with familiar, beautiful noise. Carter stood on deck, letting the sound wash over him like a blessing. Patterson was in the medical bay, the logbook clutched against his chest. The medic reported he was physically fine, but his eyes held something that worried Carter. A distance, a knowing. That night, lying in his bunk, Carter heard something that made his blood run cold. In the perfect quiet of his cabin, in the space between heartbeats, he heard it, a whisper of absolute silence, growing, spreading, learning. The silence carrier had touched them. And some things, once heard or not heard, can never be forgotten. 3 days later, Patterson stopped speaking. Doctors found nothing wrong with his vocal cords, nothing damaged in his brain. He simply chose silence, as if speaking might summon something back. When Carter visited him in the psychiatric facility, Patterson wrote a single sentence on a notepad. "It's still inside me, growing." The Ironclad's official log listed the incident as acoustic equipment malfunction. The research station was marked on classified maps with a simple notation, Zone Omega, no approach. But Carter knew the truth. They hadn't destroyed the silence. They had only wounded it, scattered it, and now it lived in Patterson, in the space between his thoughts, learning human patterns, learning how to exist in a world full of sound, waiting for the moment when it could spread again. 6 months later, Patterson was found dead in his cell. No marks, no trauma, just silence. But the nurses reported something strange. In the hour before his death, every sound in his wing of the hospital had begun to fade. Voices becoming whispers, footsteps becoming echoes. And in the moment of his death, for exactly 3 seconds, the entire facility went completely, impossibly silent. Carter received the report and locked it in his personal safe. He never spoke of the silence carrier again, but sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, he would wake to find his cabin too quiet, and he would turn on every sound he could, radio, fan, even speaking aloud to himself, because he knew that in the silence, something was always listening, always learning, always hungry for the moment when time would stop again and it could finally feed.